So welcome everybody to the latest webinar on our IOD Jersey Technology and Innovation Series webinars. I'd like to say thank you to JT for sponsoring this event, as they have been with the rest of the series. Thank you, JT. Just a reminder, the mechanics of the webinar. You can see us, but we can't see you, but that doesn't mean you're not here. So if you do have a question, please raise it in the Q&A tab, because otherwise we won't hear you, and we'll do our best to answer the question at the relevant point, and any sort of remaining questions we'll leave till the end. So what I'll be doing is I'll be moderating, taking you through the questions. I'll be asking the panelists questions, and as we try and take you through our take on the digital adoption journey. So what I'd like to do now is introduce you to our panelists. So I'll just get rid of that. You should be able to see everybody. So my name is Ian Webb. I'm the chair of the IOD Jersey Technology and Innovation Subcommittee, and I'm also the head of programs at Jersey or Channel Islands Cooperative. We also have John Collinson from JT Channel Islands, who's the head of product development. We also have Dan Hare, who's the founder and managing director of Continuum, and also IOD Director of the Year in the SME category in 2021. And I'd also like to introduce you to Heather Ann Hubble, who's CEO of the Startup Fundex Limited. So welcome to our panel, and thank you for joining us today. So in our webinar today, we'll be looking at how we get directors and business leaders to think differently about adopting technology in their businesses. Many business leaders today have seen the benefits of new technology either in their own businesses or by looking at others. We're keen to adopt technology at ever increasing pace, and particularly around the pandemic, we've seen that pace and that adoption does work. But we also have become frustrated at the speed of adopting technology in some certain technology projects. The pace of adoption is mainly down to having the right mindset in your team and having a fail fast, learn and grow, collaborate and communicate mindset. So how do we do that? I think first of all, we have to understand really what do we mean by innovation. It's a much bandied word, as is digital mindsets, but it's often seen as one of the prerequisites to operating successfully in today's business environment. So why is that? John, would you be able to just give us some insight into why we think innovation and digital mindsets is so important?
I suppose innovation, like technology, they're nothing new, and they've been going on for centuries, and the whole concept of innovation has probably gained pace an awful lot in recent years because of the arrival of what we now call digital. Now, what's digital? I started my career in the 80s, that's the 1980s, not the 1880s, in Lotus Development, the software company. And they were one of the first producers of spreadsheets and, if you like, tools for the desktop. And I think a lot of people said that's where the digital age really started, because it put an awful lot of functionality into the hands of users. And not into backroom geeks who were playing with computers using punch cards and everything. So it's people who could actually do some things themselves, create some things themselves on their computers. And of course, it's evolved since then to the point now where we're at a highly connected, highly interactive kind of world where you can't imagine life without using what we started then in computing. In fact, somebody I noticed equated this to the introduction of electricity some time ago, where electricity, first of all, just became a replacement for existing processes. So people in factories would replace oil lamps or gas lights with electricity. And only in the 15, 20 years after did they start reinventing the processes based on the fact that there was this supply of energy, which could be used for a lot of different things. And I think the digital world has brought connectivity to so many people that a lot of people are still sitting in the headlines a little bit saying, well, what do I do with it? How do I actually react to this? As you said in the introduction, the challenge is not necessarily to be scared about it, because of course we're all using it. You've been using email since the 1980s kind of thing, and of course that's an ultimate cloud-based solution, which is still in use today in various formats, and various forms. So I think the challenge is not necessarily to say, okay, everything's got to change because digital mindsets, the digital age is requiring it, but it is giving opportunities to companies. It is giving challenges to other companies to survive in a world where, if there's anything that's going to be disrupted, the arrival of digital will disrupt it. And that can change business models. It can change your internal processes to make you more effective. It can change the products that you offer to other people. It all depends on what your position is, I think, in the whole industry.
And do you think that's changed slightly in the last 18 months, 2 years?
It's interesting. I've literally just half an hour ago, an email came through to me from a company based in Liverpool, offering me a webinar, which I might actually join. It looks interesting. It's in November, talking about coming back into a new hybrid kind of workplace, because it talks about how up until that point, people have been going on a digital journey based on their own momentum, if you like, depending on their own business needs. I think at JT, we were very lucky that we had introduced, for example, cloud-based services around Microsoft, for example, around Teams, around SharePoint. If we'd gone into a lockdown without that in place, we'd have been really stuck, because it basically means we've been able to come home and work without too many disruptions to the normal way that we work. A lot of companies I know have had an awful lot of problems with that. And there's stories about people, for example, in London, where I've got some friends there who said, I love working from home because I don't have to commute an hour each way to go to the office, and it saves me so much money. But good grief, my internet at home is rubbish. I've got 10 meg at home. I can't really do anything on my business applications there, because also my business applications are not fully implemented in the cloud. So their need to go back into the office is driven by the fact that the company hasn't fully adopted the cloud environment and allowed that kind of access. Here in Jersey, I know people who say, I'm going to go home to do this Teams call because my internet at home is better than it is in the office. Now, that's a challenge to an awful lot of office infrastructure, I guess. But it also is an indication that on Jersey, we've been lucky with the infrastructure that we have. It's something that's enabled us to trial a lot of things and to move, I think, a lot more quickly and effectively into this remote environment. And we're probably finding the challenges of moving back into the hybrid environment more. I know when I do go back into the office, and there's probably about, 20, 30% of the people in hot desks, in the open plan office, all of them are on Teams calls. They spend all their time, they go into the office and they're on Teams calls talking to each other. They're not interacting in the office environment anymore. And of course, it's like the old days with the telephone kind of thing. People tended to shout more than they needed to. They didn't realize that telephone actually did amplify what they were talking about. So you have an awful lot of loud, one-sided conversations around the office, which actually is quite disruptive. It's quite difficult. And you find the meeting rooms are full of people who just sit there on their own with somebody on the screen without, sitting down and interacting with people again. So I think the move out of out of the environment we've got into now into the hybrid environment is going to be challenging. But I also do hope that a lot of the work that's happened that was going before then in gradually moving applications into the cloud continues, because we've probably halted a lot of those and focused a lot more on the tools that we needed to interact while we were remote working. But now when we come back into the office, the journey into the cloud is still going to be important, I think, for companies, and I hope that everybody picks it up again and moves with it.
Well, certainly, I think the job isn't done, is it? It's we've got what we needed to keep the job moving. But yeah, it's definitely, I think there's definitely more that needs to be done around maybe smoothing applications and processes so that they work a lot more effectively.
My focus is on the product side, and so the kinds of products that were gradually becoming more useful and more used, where cloud PBX systems, virtual PBX systems, unified communications. And I think that's taken a leap forward as people have worked from home and said, I don't have access to my normal phone. How many people still have a phone when you go back into the office? You expect it to be integrated into your Teams environment or your Zoom environment or whatever. So how is that going to happen in the next stage? There's still a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, I think so. But I think there's also, we've talked a little bit about technology there and a bit about process, but obviously the third angle to that is people. And I think I mentioned mindset a couple of times as we're coming into this. But we obviously, the people need to be in the right frame of mind. So Heather Ann, what's your take on what kind of mindset is needed as we sort of survive and thrive in this business environment today?
I think that the biggest thing is we need to embrace change and be comfortable with the change. And many of us have had to go through things that we didn't expect in the last 18 months. To John's point, we're taking on new tools. We really need to think of them as tools. They are not things that we're going to replace what we do. And so as we're thinking about innovation, we're thinking, what are we actually trying to do here? We're trying to be innovative. We're trying to digitize. What does that mean? We're taking some technology and some tools, and we're making our lives better. We're making the processes that we do better, and we're making sure that we're improving it. So the last thing I want to hear when I go in to talk to somebody about how are we going to change things is, I just want it to do this. We don't want to put the technology in to do what you do today. We want you to think about, what does great look like in the future? What would my life be like if I could do my job without having to do X, Y, and Z? And what tools can we leverage to do that? It's that mindset of, I know that the technology is going to come in. It's not coming in to replace my job. It's coming in to replace that mindless drudgery that I need to do, that has to be done, that's important. But actually, if the tools could do it, I could focus on much more interesting things and interact with my colleagues and my clients and have something that's a much more efficient process. And when I've worked with clients, when I've worked with my teams, it's getting people to own that I can make my life better. I can make my job more interesting. I can make things better for my organization, for my clients, and I can get excited about it, which means that I'm empowered with that innovation process, as opposed to feeling it's going to weigh me down. I'm never going to get it. It's not going to get delivered. It's not going to give me what I want. So getting people excited that actually they own the ability to make it work for them and for the organization, and empowered to feel they can make better suggestions. And for me, I've several times in the past 15 years, I've gone into somebody and said, look, we're doing this because the organization wants to, but what do you want to get out of it? Oh, it's not going to work. We've never been able to do it before. It's not broken. It's fine. And, I would say to them, but you've just told me that you sent this spreadsheet to somebody and they did it, and, give them an example of something they've done. Wouldn't it be cool if the tool could actually calculate that for you, and then you could sit there and put your value added judgment on it, thinking about why that output makes sense or not? And, then when people hear it that way, they think, oh, that makes sense. I can put my people value on it by leveraging that skill. So it's really giving people that concept of, it's not about having this done to me. It's about, I'm part of it and I'm going to make it better. And as a result, we're all going to enjoy ourselves more and be able to deliver our service better and be a better company and survive with our clients better.
So how do you create that buzz, that excitement and commitment in these teams to begin with?
I like to start with a proof of concept that delivers something fast and quick, so that people feel that they're getting something. There's nothing more soul destroying than sit down and say, we've got an 18-month delivery channel and you're going to get this in about 12 months and the rest of it in 18 months. Let's pick a couple of really quick wins that if we could do this, that would solve this simple thing for somebody. And let's make it happen in a few weeks. But let's commit that we're going to do it in 3 or 6 weeks and actually feel that we've made some progress. That gives us the chance to say, how much can we actually deliver in a reasonable amount of time? So let's chunk it up and let's win. Let's create a series of win targets for ourselves. So you've got that excitement of, okay, I know what we're trying to get to at the end, but actually we're delivering some stuff along the way and we feel good. And the other thing is, do not be afraid to fail. Fail early and often is my recommendation. Go try it. Think about what you're trying to do. And as wacky as the idea feels like, do it in 3 weeks or 6 weeks and say, okay, it didn't work, but what did we learn from it so we can do something different the next time? So it's that combination of get excited because it's going to make what you do more interesting and better, but feel empowered to make mistakes and learn what would be better the next time, because that fail early and often, you know, there are many businessmen who'll say, I've got one more good bankruptcy behind me. You learn, as long as you learn from it, you should make people feel comfortable that it won't always be perfect. It won't always be right, but that's okay, because we'll learn something and we can do a better job the next time.
I think also, if I can just add in there, I think the technology helps you to do that with less risk.
Exactly.
Some of the tools that you can get online, and I know Dan will talk about a lot of those later, a lot of the tools you get online are available as a service online. You can try them. It's no coincidence that a lot of them give you 30 days free trial or 60 days free trial. Work out yourself whether it's something that is applicable to you. And if you decide it isn't to you or your team or your particular problem, you just stop it and try something new. So actually trying things is a lot easier, I think, and almost your sport for choice with all the things that you can play with online.
And in your experience, Heather Ann, have you seen this ripple effect? You know, if you affect one team and you create this quick win in the one team, do you see that rippling through the organization, or does it tend to stay with that team and you've effectively got one super performing team and then the rest are kind of stuck in the 1890s still?
It sort of depends how you set it up in the first place. So it's very simple to do. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. It's easier to do it in a discrete team, which are all on the same page and have a series of things to do. Where it's better to do this is across a series of teams in a larger type of activity, and then you get that quick win across more areas and you get more people interested, so that you can actually get people to see what that output was and be able to say, oh, they did it and they did it across several areas, we could do that too. Where I found the best groundswell is where you actually get a room together of the end-to-end process and explain where the problems are from each person's perspective. And then you might have somebody say, oh, you know what, we could fix that by doing this. Suddenly, if you've got everybody that's in that end-to-end journey involved in that brainstorming session of what's broken and what would be great if it looked like it, people often find some short-term solutions or some longer-term solutions that solve certain parts of the problem on their own, and then realize, actually, we could be thinking this through much more broadly. I mean, in one of the environments, one of the clients I was working with, I got someone calling me and saying, I've been asked to spend $60,000 on a server for robotic process automation. That seems like a lot of money. And my answer was, what are you trying to do? Turned out they had a 7-step process. The first 3 were going to be replaced by an HR system change, and 2 of the other 4, actually, if they changed their physical process, they would have reduced by half the amount of work they were doing. So they didn't need to spend $60,000 on RPA server. They didn't actually need RPA. They just needed to sit down and look at, as a team, end to end, what are we doing and can we do it better? And I think we get caught up in this digitization and innovation and say we've got to use tools. Actually, what we're looking at is, what do we need to do? Do we need to fix a process? Do we need to fix a policy? Or do we need a tool? And then we can go, right, now where's the place to go? Then there's to John's point, there's lots of tools that you can try to see if they work. But you know what the problem is you're trying to solve for?
I think if I was going to sort of chime in a little bit on that, then it is there's a temptation to see a technology as a panacea. So we need to improve our marketing, so we're going to buy Salesforce. Okay, right. Well, that's not going to improve your marketing, is it? That's just, you just got a new platform from producing it. Now, I think, to take your point there, Heather Ann, about RPA being robotic process automation. So there's this decidedly not exciting technology in a lot of ways. It's pretty old school screen scraping, and it's automating people doing boring tasks that they can only get wrong, really. The classic sort of swivel chair process where they take data from one thing and put it in the other. And I think part of the solution might well have been a bit of RPA, probably not as much as the RPA consultant would have liked to have been doing. But I think I wish that there was more of a sort of 80-20 approach to business problems, right? Because quite often, and I know what you mean about that sort of end-to-end process, maybe on the butcher's paper with the post-it notes, sort of doing the process flows, Lean Six Sigma or whatever. the trouble is you're going to get to the end, and then it's all we need to do is change a field in the source system in order to finish off the process. And it's like, yeah, that'll take a year, right? Because there's a big stack and everyone is overburdened and under-resourced. But within that room, if you could have automated the 80% of really routine stuff and then gone on and done 80% of the next process and then the next process, and then go back, and then the people will certainly understand the 20% much better than they did before, and then focus on that too. And I think it's kind of, I completely chime in on experimentation. You have to experiment. If species don't have mutations and experimentation, then they're going to die, right? You have to keep changing somehow. But it's that kind of process of, oh, we're doing a project and we're done. We've done our digital transformation project, right? We've done our data literacy project. And that's the kind of the central fallacy, I think, really, is what people don't want to hear is that this is a continuous improvement program, because there's a sort of an existential split between pre and post internet businesses. I would suggest that, we're just hoping that no Airbnb or Uber turns up in our field, right? Because if they do, they're built on data. And they're not having to try and retrofit rocket engines onto a horse and cart, if you know what I mean. And I think that's the game in town, isn't it, for all of us? Is how do we help real incumbent businesses with real clients, real data, real people? But they wouldn't start from here, but they are. How do we get there from here? And to sort of chime in with John, I blame him. I know now I blame him for everyone doing everything in Excel, right? Lotus 123 was clearly better than Excel.
Yeah.
Huh?
Far better.
Yeah, it was so much better with WYSIWYG. What a nerd. But I would say it's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it, really, that in those days, the only let's say the 90s, the only exposure most people would have had to a computer was at work. And it would undoubtedly be much more powerful than anything they'd have at home, with a better printer and a scanner and a shredder and all of that, right? And in my first job, I had access to CompuServe, which is the forerunner of internet. None of that. At home, you were trying to struggle with rubbish old PCs with turbo buttons and sort of hardware modems. Whereas you split that now, you touched on that, John. Thank you to JT for the excellent fibre to door infrastructure we've got, which means that people mostly do have better internet at home than they have at the office. But it's not only that, their systems are better at home. If they look at their phone and look at all of the functionality that they have on their phone that automatically updates, they pay rental on it. If it doesn't give value, they turn it off and move to another one. Their data just magically works and they magically interact. You kind of, when you actually compare that then to most people's technology experience in their office life, it's very different. And I think that's the kind of thing where we are, right? We're lucky in Jersey in that there is a change mentality and we're big enough to be able to make significant change. But that's the kind of mindset shift that people in real businesses need to be thinking about.
I think we were talking about the mindset shift being, with the people in the teams. How do you generate that mindset shift so that you've almost like you've got the multiplier effect, haven't you? Because you might have a few evangelists who can do this kind of thing because that's what they've done in the past, or they may be that sort of end of mind. But then you want to try and get that into each of the teams so that they're then doing it themselves. And I think that empowerment piece, but they also need not just the mindset and the tooling, but they also need to have the capabilities to, can you re-engineer your own process kind of thing, and then eat your own dog food. So I think that's part of the picture, isn't it? But we also focus on leadership to some extent. It's got to be driven from the top. So what elements are needed then for our sort of leaders of today to help this to nurture this innovation mindset, develop it? Does that mean, do all leaders need to have that sort of technology background, or do they need to be tech savvy? Dan, do you want to chip in?
Ideally, I guess, but I mean, I think I'm probably sort of less well qualified to speak to this than probably Heather and John, who
you will have, in your interactions with businesses across the Channel Islands, you would have seen, at the exec level.
Yes, well, we deliberately try and do quite simple things, right? That we're just trying to automate manual data tasks fundamentally. We're ready to do machine learning and things when people are ready, but right now, people need to get their arms around the data that they've got. And yeah, I think it's what's been already touched on by my esteemed colleagues here. Is that it's a mindset of continuous improvement and experimentation, and having the freedom and the resources. That's what people don't want to hear, is that there needs time and skills and tools to allow people to get past where they are now, and not to do more sticking plasters on where they are. And I think that, as I said, there's quite a short cadence to people's executive positions quite often these days. And does a prime minister want to pay for a hospital in case he's not here in 4 years, 5 years time? It's not just the leadership, it has to be the shareholders that need to be seeing this as an enduring program that they want to invest in, I would suggest.
I'd say that it'll obviously depend on the business itself, but a CEO is not necessarily going to be CEO because he's a digital techie. He'll be there because of other skills that he brings to the party to run that business. But I would say that increasingly that he needs to become, I've heard this phrase, digitally intelligent, so that he has a sort of almost a passion to understand how other businesses are using technology. So just talking to his friends, talking to similar businesses, as well as to customers, as well as to even competitors, just understanding how they are reacting to what's going on in the digital world around them, and challenging his people to say, okay, so what are the implications for our business? We know we've got to do something. Part of the premise for this whole thing was there is so much going on. How does a leader decide what is important and what isn't? And I'm still a fan now. I've been in large companies like telcos for most of my working life, and these are the ultimate legacy organization that obviously wants everybody to be technically aware and digitally aware, but are sometimes the worst at internally understanding how to change the processes that they've had for decades, even, connecting bits of wire, from end to end. And in those cases, you almost need a kickstart of an innovation czar or a team that actually starts challenging people to think about this. And exactly as Heather Ann said, you've got to do it cross team as well, because there's no point in just trying to look at your own individual area, because the whole point of digital is that it's interconnected. It brings other people together far more than they might have been otherwise. So have somebody who challenges people to interact and to work out solutions to what they agree are common problems. And then you start having a debate as well, what's the ideal size of an innovation team? Is everybody in innovation, or do you really have a small number of people? Now, I always remember they said, the ideal number of people in a team is 6, because they worked that out in the military. I think it was the average size of a troop. Bezos has his rule about the 2 pizza rule, doesn't he? Which basically says, if I can't feed a team with 2 pizzas, it's too big.
It's too big.
So how do you sort of get the right size with the right people to produce the results? Because innovation is all about not just having ideas, not just sitting there, putting ideas up on the board. It's actually doing something with them and turning them into a process improvement, a product, something of benefit to the business. So that whole process is actually quite a difficult one to get going if people are not really into the whole way of doing it.
And we've had a question from the audience talking about the fact that many organizations have legacy applications, and some more so than others. And so from a leadership perspective, it can be quite difficult, because you need to keep the lights on these old tools because you need them, because you're afraid to let them go. And therefore that makes it a little difficult to be thinking about new technology. And the key, I think, there is to find a way to have an evangelist explain how that will help. So I've got the perfect example. I was helping the risk organization of a financial institution think about how they could use technology to improve the processes they were doing, because the front office was all digital. The client-facing stuff was all digital. Meanwhile, the risk department was all the hamsters running around on the wheel. And I went to the head of credit risk and I said, look, we've been looking at this concept of new data lakes and new data innovation numbering calculators and so on, where we think we could actually find information much quicker, and we'd like you to explore it. And the answer I got was, and this goes to David Brown's point, no, we've spent the last 15 years building this specific tool. We've spent a fortune on it. It does exactly what we need to do. We don't want to tinker with it. We can change the models easily. And I said, okay, do you know how much that cost you to run a year? He said, well, of course I know how much that costs to run a year. And he said it would be incredibly expensive to replace it. And I said, okay, well, our team, working with some of your department leaders, have looked at what we could do. And what we've worked out is actually, we could run, that 30,000 customer simulation that you want to do, and that you figure it would take 30 days on your existing infrastructure. Oh, and by the way, you wouldn't actually be able to run the business during that 30-day period. They've run it on the data lake with the new data visualization tools in 2.5 minutes. And they haven't affected your day-to-day. And he kind of went, oh yeah, but we've spent all this money. We don't, to David Brown's point, we don't want to waste all this money we've spent. And my response was, we've done the calculation, and you're right, this would not be cheap to replace. It would take us 15 million pounds in 3 years to replace it. In that time frame, you will save 12 million pounds, and you will save £1.5 million every single year thereafter. It doesn't take you very long to get back to where you were before. And by the way, your team's been involved in this, and I'm sure they'll be happy to explain to you, and much better equipped than I am. And he kind of sat and went, well, that's interesting. So while he had that legacy, and it was a starting point of, I don't want to replace it because we've spent so much time and effort on it and it's expensive. Actually, if you can find a way of describing a way to offset those costs or deliver some better service for the same thing, it makes it much easier for those leaders to sort of step away and say, okay, I know I've got these legacy systems. Is there a way that we can work with them, tie something in together to make them work? Or actually, do we need to bite the bullet and replace it? Because in the long run, we will get more functionality and it will actually end up costing us less. If you're in the middle of a cost fit exercise, that's a bit difficult because you may need to be in a position where you have to spend more. And where we've got multiple legacy systems, it's a lot harder. But the key there is, as John and Dana both said, take a risk, try something, do a little proof of concept. And if it doesn't work, you haven't broken the bank, literally, if you're working in a financial institution, but you've also found out why it didn't work and how to change that. And it's that being willing to try stuff and trying to find new ways to keep the lights on with all those legacy systems, because God knows at some point you're going to break and you're not going to be able to fix them. So you're going to have to replace them at some point. Wouldn't it be better to try and be doing that forward looking than the day it falls apart and nobody knows how to fix it anymore?
So if you're the CEO of an organization, how do you know where to start? How do you know where to look for that key project, to get you going? Heather Ann?
I'm not sure there's any one place to start. I think as the leader,
how do you do that?
I think what you need to do is say, right, am I trying to replace something that I'm worried is broken? Am I trying to meet a regulatory objective that I cannot meet today? Or am I just simply trying to find a way to do the service in a more efficient way? So if I'm the CEO that has a regulatory imperative, I'm going to be saying, right, what can we do to enable us to deliver those regulatory results faster and better? And I'm going to be willing to spend some money on it. If I'm the CEO that has the shareholders saying to him or to her, you have to cut back the budget, you have to find a way to deliver this better, I need to look operationally at how I can make that change. So the focus of the leadership needs to be, what is the strategic objective we're trying to make, and then where in the organization is the best opportunity to help us deliver that strategic objective and leverage the digital innovation opportunities along the way.
Okay.
I would say it's, it's hard to force change on a steady state organization. Would certainly be the case, because why bother, right? We're okay, kind of, we wouldn't start from here, but we're kind of okay, nothing's broken too badly, so we can kind of manage within the parameters of our team and our objectives. and most importantly, our budgets, right? But it's when there's a change coming along, or there's something that needs to happen urgently. As Heather says, it may be a regulatory event, it may be a technology refresh, stuff's out of warranty, or you're doing a disposal or an acquisition. Obviously, lots of that going on.
So there's a burning platform. There's something that I need to do, because otherwise something will fall over.
Otherwise, there's no reason for people to stick their neck out and change how they do things. And so when something is being changed, think about doing that change differently. The traditional data cleansing process of bringing in the director's children, during the summer holiday. Meanwhile, someone else is breaking the data right upstream. So, our approach is just data automation, really. And it's that you can build in continuous improvement, continuous data quality improvement into your daily process, have it running every day, and have people manage a list of exceptions to 0, such that when you do that, your systems will all work better, and you'll be in a much better state for the move to the cloud, as John says. We firmly believe that the future is code-free, cloud data integrated with baked-in AI into everything that we do. But obviously, we're a long way from there. But if we don't trust our data in our current legacy, as David states quite rightly, in our current legacy systems, then how are you going to get there from here? Because all the technology problems are fixed, right? All that's going to happen now is they'll get better, quicker, and cheaper, and better integrated. So, it's not a steady state problem, because even by staying still, you're going behind, because technology is running, and there will be businesses that are after your customers based on these new technologies.
That's the point as well, is understanding your customers as much as the market, and understanding what they're asking you to do as well, because a lot of them will be going through the same kind of challenges about how they react in their businesses to the challenge of innovation, challenge of the digital world. Some of them will be coming to you saying, why can't you deliver the product in this way? Or why can't I interact with you differently? And it's not necessarily removing choice. I mean, we're, for example, going through in JT, we're going through a whole process, obviously, of working out how we best interact with customers, because while you don't want to say, okay, we want to get rid of our operators so that you just interact on chat, because clearly that would not be particularly attractive for some people. There are a lot of people who do want to interact with you in that way, because it suits their way of interacting with various suppliers or whatever. And so how do you actually pull those together so you've not got silos of, I've got a chat team here, I've got a call center team here, I've got an email team there, I've got the retail outlet there, I've got all these different routes to market. How do I actually have a consistent view to the customer where whichever channel I go into, I'm recognized in exactly the same way, and I get the same kind of service, and I can do the same sort of things. So if I want to be fully 100% online, to change my services, to order new services, to configure what I've got, great, I can do that. Or if I want to go into the shop for somebody to do it for me, or if I want somebody to come to my house and actually do it for me, I'm willing to pay for that. Those options have to be there, but they have to be based on, as you said before, Dan, the single view of the customer, the data being consistent around it, rather than the innovation in those individual teams, which we've seen so far. And at the same time, you're going to be looking to what not just your competitors are doing, but what companies in your sector are doing in other markets, in other jurisdictions. And you'll see, if you were in London, for example, looking at Uber appearing in the States, and you were a taxi company in a city, if you were digitally aware and you were reading about those, you would know about that. You would be preparing yourself for that coming, and maybe even getting ahead of the game. If you were not, as I said, digitally aware, digitally intelligent, keeping your eye open for those sorts of things, you would be as surprised about that coming into your backyard as probably a lot of companies were. So you've really got to understand how technology can impact your market, how it can disrupt everything, completely take apart the way that you've been working, and how can you be ready for that as well.
And I guess the counterpoint to it is that the world is getting a smaller place. So you don't just have to worry about everyone coming in and trying to compete with us in your own jurisdiction. That, I've heard it said that there's probably 7 years of exceptionalism left for offshore jurisdictions before they'll be competing on a level playing field with everybody else. But everyone in the world is your potential customer, right? That if you can be
both ways, doesn't it?
Find a high growth niche that has the universal applicability and be the best in the world at it. So if it's a even if it's a tiny niche, a large amount times a small niche is still reasonably there. And I think it's that kind of thing, isn't it? There's too much of an element sometimes of being all things to all men and women. And I think that's our opportunity here, particularly because we've got a great infrastructure and we're sort of big enough that there's some really good people here who know each other, but they're not competitors. But we do have to be aware that we've had it pretty good for quite a while, I would suggest, in the offshore jurisdictions.
Yes, and I guess that then leads, as we were talking about, this sort of burning platform potentially that needs that spark to then create the change needed. Sometimes you feel like you're sort of paddling around in this sort of sea, you're the frog that's in the pan, and the water level is sort of gently rising, isn't it? Temperature's gently rising, but you don't know that there's disruption is coming down the track in your particular industry. And to John's point, that's where we need to have that sort of digital awareness and around, you want to be the disruptor, you don't want to be disrupted.
I think that it's the change educated as well. It's that change experimentation mindset, because it's all very well saying, okay, we're going to do some digital experimentation, but if down the line the business is set up with such sort of strictures on budget, so change budget, very, very, very closely watched within organizations, takes a long time to hire people, to get new headcount approval, takes a long time to get new suppliers on your supplier list, takes a long time to get new technologies on your approved technology list. And I think that's where you lose the momentum sometimes of that innovation program, and the Skunk Works and the fail fast and the do PSE, proof of value, is it comes down to the leaders of the companies that they need to be allowing latitude for change to happen, because it's almost like, bizarrely enough, like as John's saying, it's like the new electricity, isn't it? Everyone will be on Office 365 and internet based, and and then all of the great things that we've seen happen in a year and a half will be more universal. But it's, where do you go from there? How do you bring in more innovation tools when they're being kept out by the company's own policies?
So potentially then, are organizations set up in the wrong way? So is their governance structures configured in the right way, wrong way, to allow this kind of innovation to happen?
I think I kind of touched on that there's always many reasons for people to say no to change. It's not in the budget, not in the strategy, that we've got a year of projects, like Heather Ann was saying, that we've already got. It will go to the back of the queue, maybe get to there, but in the meantime there'll be lots of existential things like regulatory and system upgrades that will take priority. And so what do we need to do?
What do we need to do to make it right then? What would be the right sort of structure for the organisation to nurture that?
As per John's point, is that sort of, there's an innovation engine, but that can't be doing it to the departments. The departments have to have people who are involved in that and who are part of continuous improvement. And so that needs budget, that needs headcount, and that needs the license to go and work in every part of the building, right? Not just in the change receptive departments that quite often then suffer by a headcount restriction next year, when other departments that didn't participate are left to sail on serenely. I think, and that has to come from the leadership, doesn't it, John and Heather?
Yeah. I think it does, but David Brown's made a point that we're bought into the fact this needs to happen, but maybe those of us who are participating need to be thinking about, does my company actually think the same way? And if they don't, what can I do to move the dial? Yes, there's lots out there. I think to Dan's point, maybe it's not about the change team. Maybe it's about each of us saying, what do we see as something that could happen, and taking it to our leadership, our management, our team leader, whoever it happens to be, and say, look, I've thought about something. Can we try it? Can we get the budget? Can we get the time? Can we just go, some of us maybe go off piece, just outside of our desk to work on this, to try it? Because leadership will say, yes, we want to do this, but don't actually necessarily understand how much effort that is for you trying to do it side of your desk. But if you've said to somebody, look, we could actually figure out a way to do this, and you get a few people who are incentivized and want to do it themselves side of their desk, and go to management and say, look, we think we could try and solve a problem. Can we try it? You've got that bottom-up groundswell meeting the management stated objectives, but you can help push that dial a little faster because maybe people aren't in organizations that deal well with change. And so if you start on that smaller, I've seen something I can do, let's try it. It gives management an opportunity to say, let's give it a go and let's use it as a learning experience and take the good from it as well as the bad. And then you're not looking at a specific change function with the change champions telling people how to do it. You've got the people who are on the ground dealing with it, trying to sort it out and then really feeling like they own it.
And reward them, I would say reward them for their wins, right? So if they free up their time by getting routine things done, then they keep that time to hopefully serve clients better, right? And to keep going and do another one, not just to be a discrete project, but that, get some runs on the board and then keep going.
I suppose I look at this from more of the product point of view, and it's been most of my career I've been in that kind of thing where I've been thinking about how you innovate in what you produce to sell to customers, to add value to what you can give to customers rather than pure internal processes. And that's a very different sort of kind of challenge. And there I've come in my illustrious career, I suppose, since I was at Lotus in the 80s. I'm a favor of what they call the Skunk Works. And I think Lotus was actually one of the first ones where I saw that happening. So going back to 1984 or 5 or something like this, as we said, Lotus was probably seen as one of the most innovative companies in the digital age. It was long before Microsoft was even sort of really on the scene. Lotus was going to be the Microsoft of the future till they sided with IBM and chose the wrong operating system. But one of the things that they did is that after the creation of the first 2 spreadsheets, Lotus 1, 2, 3 and Symphony, an engineer, a high qualified MIT graduate called Ray Ozzie, came to the management committee and said, I've got this idea for actually what is now seen as one of the first collaborative pieces of software, which is Lotus Notes. And he signed an agreement with Lotus to go off with a team that was funded by Lotus and develop this and give Lotus first rights to sell it and commercialize it afterwards. If Lotus didn't want it, then obviously they could go away and do with it what they wanted to. So they did that. And then I think everybody knows Lotus for Lotus Notes now, not necessarily the other products. And I think somebody even thought that when Lotus was originally was finally bought by IBM in the mid-90s for $3.5 billion, they reckon that $3 billion of that was due to the value of Lotus Notes. So they, creating the team, put them, all right, we will fund you, we will help you, we'll give you that freedom to do what you want outside the corporate structure and the governance which there is around established software products. In that case, proved well. Now, they also did it with a couple of other products. There was an email client they created, which went nowhere. But they tried a few of those sorts of things, and some of them worked, some of them didn't. And I think that's the trial, and that was obviously quite high risk. There's quite a lot of money involved in it in those days, but it was the only way that they actually felt that they could make that innovative spirit actually lead to something constructive.
And we've had a couple of questions, comments from Andy Jarvis. Thank you, Andy. They're very good points. One of the points is that not many companies have these technology incubators resourced internally to be able to deal with this. And that, if they do, then they shouldn't be constrained. I'm sorry, Andy, I may be putting slightly stronger words around this than you intended, but constrained of the forced into the technical build and the legacy approval processes to get them in. Let's remember, we're talking innovation. While we are talking digital adoption, we need to do some of that innovation without the tools to start with. So some of it may be, how do we take our existing tools and use them differently? And taking a team of people who are actually doing stuff with it today and saying we could maybe use it a little differently is a good step in the right direction. And that doesn't necessarily need a technology incubator with its own separate budget. What you might find is you have people who say, we've got an idea, we'd like to try it. Can we get a little bit of budget to try it? And we'll give you the time on the side of our desk. But it's how do we leverage the skills and resources of what we've got internally first before we then go and try and build a whole new project with a governance process and a budget process? Totally get the point. Those can be viewed as constraining. But here what we're trying to say is, these are all great things. You don't have to be sitting in an incubator, technology incubator, or an innovation team or a change team in the organization to make them happen. Seize the moment yourself. Look at your tools and say, could we use these more efficiently, what we already have? And can we champion these changes because they'll make our lives better without having a big change team and without needing a governance process? So there's a quid pro quo here. We have great technology stories that people can do, but there are other things that people can do without actually having those huge internal incubator approaches.
Yeah, Andy's, that's a really good point.
Andy's other point there is about, asking about, the technology and the constraints, and David also, picking up on that I think the key thing is that the solution isn't an Excel macro or someone knocking up myfirstpython.com, right? It needs to be something that will be accommodated and scalable within the organization. So to your point, Heather Ann, yes, we could probably use whatever we've got better and probably buy a select few tools that work, right? But code free is going to be the future, right? Yeah. For sure. Is that you look at all of the investment and all of the valuations of new software and business offerings, it's all code free now. It's that complexity is hidden from you in its configuration, and integration is the game. And so, as I said, how do you get your data in a fit state to move into this lovely new house, right? Because no one's really in that fit state yet.
I remember when we were talking in some of the pre-discussions for this webinar, I think Heather Ann, you mentioned it about people who were still having versions of spreadsheets that they were emailing to each other in large organizations. So you had multiple versions of the same data that nobody knew which the latest one was. And a simple thing of moving everything to online shared files, which is a standard application in this space, can save huge amounts of time, effort, and potential for error as well. So there are little things you can do like that could have a huge impact on the organization's efficiency.
It's simple things like, if you're saving a file and sending it to somebody, use the naming convention they need to have when they receive it, so they don't then need to resave it as the new naming convention, which was one of the steps in the example I gave you earlier that they thought the RPA would fix, when actually it was a naming convention that solved part of the problem, obviously not the whole thing. But it's thinking about what's the right thing for the next person in the chain, and where's the right, how do we leverage the tools we've got today to be able to make this easier.
And then I'm sure Andy will be interested about being an IT head of IT, about introducing something like Teams in the organization. There's a major investment in putting 365 into your organization, but do you actually know all the functionality there is within 365? Do you actually know all the other applications that there are there? If you just go into Teams and you look at all the other applications that are usually connected to it or available to it, you haven't got a clue what most of them are, yet they're all collaborative tools that in some way could help organizations function better. So how do you actually help people navigate the possibilities of the features that you already have on your desktop, that you already have in the system? How do you start getting people to say, well, this is an interesting tool, let's start playing with it? Is it going back to what we were saying before? Is it a team that does it and it works out from the team? Or is the ultimate thing to get the CEO to use it and then everybody else will use it because they don't want to be left behind? What is the best way of getting these sorts of things used?
You within the 365 ecosystem, you get hundreds of applications through Microsoft and third parties, and it's almost like do you let your team members go play with those and develop, so they're kind of developing their own processes themselves and collaboration themselves, or do you want to direct that and manage that and therefore constrict it in some ways?
I think it's a question, without getting too technical about all the individual Power BI, Power Apps and all of that. But I think 80-20, right? Straightforward things, just do it that way. It doesn't even need to go into a change pot. There's stuff that You can use things like Teams. Yeah, we use Teams a lot, obviously, right? But then Planner works really nicely in terms of quite simple to-do lists. And yeah, there's Microsoft Forms, and there's a lot of really nice, straightforward, very straightforward, easy things you can use Office 365 for. I think the danger with some of those tools is that they're not quite as fully functional as other tools, such that you can end up with get the 80% done in 20% of the time, and then people are spending forever maintaining Power BI dashboards in the same way that they maintain spreadsheets. Right?
Yeah.
And probably another reason why we're also comfortable using this tool now, or even Teams, is because we use it in our personal life. It's going back to what you were talking about before, Dan. You've got the stuff in your home, you've got the equipment in your home. You started using this because lockdown has forced you to start using video communications to talk to your family, friends around the world. And a lot of people have suddenly said, actually, you can do something with that is actually quite a good way of doing something. It's quite a meaningful way of doing it. And so that has probably helped the use of it, the adoption of it in a lot of companies. So this is where the consumer sides come to business. It's usually the other way around, but sometimes consumer experiences help the business world.
So I'm conscious that we're rushing up to the end of the hour, and that's gone really quick. So what we wanted to leave everyone with, those who stayed the course, were some takeaways. So really just to give you something to hopefully come in the morning, Friday morning, fully invigorated and ready to start your innovation journey. So Heather Ann, what takeaways do you want to leave with our guests?
So just very quickly, I think innovation isn't just about the tools. Figure out what is the burning problem that causes you the most amount of effort right now, and think about a process or a tool that you've got today to be able to use it and leverage that. Technology is here to stay, but we can use it. It doesn't use us.
Fantastic. And John?
I say start small. Think of small things. See, exactly as we said right at the beginning. Don't try and redesign your complete end-to-end sales and product delivery process, because it'll get bogged down. People won't see sort of huge change. Nobody will be willing to say it's finished and therefore be able to either kill it because it hasn't delivered, or show off how much it's delivered. Pick out little things that you can do, and individuals can bring those to the table as much as an organization or an IT department or an HR department when it comes to, I don't know, how to onboard people. Everybody can think about how to make their individual roles a bit more efficient. Pick small ones like that, show the success of those, and encourage others to do the same sort of thing.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dan?
Yeah, well, Andy Jarvis just made a point that change budgets are one thing, time for learning is another. I think people need to be able to, get the fruits of their success, when they get some time back by automating parts of their jobs, and they should be allowed to use that to automate more of their jobs, right? And then to use savings in order to invest in more people and better tools. But I'd say, do it now. The time is now. Like the classic is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Unfortunately, we don't have time machines, so now's the time. I think everyone feels they're uniquely badly placed to start, but they've got to get on with their data now. I would just suggest and get on with it and start getting usable data without building endless spreadsheets.
So what I'm hearing,
we're all guilty of that. Yeah. However digitally savvy we are, we do that.
What I'm hearing is start now, start small, but do something. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panelists, Heather Ann, Dan and John. Thank you to JT for sponsoring this event, as with all of our innovation series events this year. And a big thank you to Zoe for organising. You can't see her, but she's there in the background, and she's been the sort of the mastermind behind all of our organisation. So thanks for that, and thank you all for attending. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.